Once again, hello everyone, and good afternoon to you all. So welcome to the Let's Build Synergies between the three Rio Conventions. So my name is Stefania Perrin, and I am a fellow at the Capacity Building Subdivision in means of implementation, and it's a pleasure to see so many of you here. So before we get started properly, allow me to give you some brief information about the Joint Capacity Building Program by the Rio Conventions. So the value of synergies is always mentioned and recognized, but little has been done to operationalize them to yield concrete results. So some years ago, the Joint Liaison Group, established by the Secretariat of the Free Rio Convention in 2001, with the aim of collecting and sharing information and coordinating the work of a secretariat, that is, the UNFCCC, CBD, and UNCCD, agreed to the development of the Rio Conventions Joint Capacity Building Program, which aims to strengthen the capacities of national and local policymakers and practitioners to integrate and foster synergies, coordination, and coherence in the implementation of the three Rio Conventions and the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Joint Capacity Building Program started its full implementation this year and is being managed jointly by a core team of colleagues from the three different divisions of the Secretariat. So the Joint Capacity Building Program aims to strengthen the capacities of relevant national institutions and individual policymakers and practitioners to integrate and foster synergies between the three Rio Conventions and the synergies, as mentioned. And also, it aims to establish a mutual learning experience among policymakers from national institutions involved in the design and implementation of policies. And it also involves practitioners supporting programs and projects at a local level. So, with that in mind, today's event is one of the activities of a Joint Capacity Building Program. And through this event, you will learn more about the importance of synergistic approaches to achieve the three Rio Conventions objectives. Now, let me run you through today's agenda. Next slide, please. It's not working. Okay, so we will begin this event with a welcome remarks from CBD Secretariat and the Youth Negotiators Academy. This will be followed by a presentation by Friendship and Rio Impact, who will provide a snapshot of entry points for building synergies. Following the presentations, we will break out into group work sessions on three different topics. So we will provide more details on the modalities of those sessions later. At the end, the UNFCCC Secretariat will provide closing remarks. Now, without further ado, let us begin with the opening remarks. And it is my pleasure to welcome our colleague from the CBD Secretariat, Tristan Tyrell, for the opening remarks. Tristan? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Indeed, my name is Tristan Tyrrell. I'm the Programme Officer responsible for biodiversity, climate change and dry and subhumid lands at the CBD Secretariat. So on a technical level, it is my responsibility to identify those linkages across the three Rio Conventions. And that is, as has been alluded to, an interest and an expectation for a long time in terms of how do we break down these silos. How do we identify those opportunities for linking across the three Rio Conventions, given that after 30 years we are still working to a certain extent in three separate silos? And that's why for the CBD Secretariat, and I think for across all three conventions, the Joint Capacity Building Initiative has been such an excellent step forward into trying to support parties to identify those opportunities for those synergies, for those linkages, and actually take them forward in a meaningful manner. This is obviously a discussion that has happened in various guises at various times or down through the years. But the challenge has always been about the operationalization of it. We have identified various opportunities, means for synergies, whether it's looking at it from a finance lens, whether it's looking at it from a specific thematic lens, whether it's land use or whether it's restoration or whether it's water or what have you, or from a more of an operational perspective, whether it's sort of harmonization of reporting or joint financial mechanisms. But in reality, we are still, or I should say, parties to the conventions are still operating through that separated manner where it's NBSAPs in one corner, NDCs and NAPs in one corner, LDN targets in a separate corner. And it's trying to identify, well, what are the linkages across these three policy instruments and how can they be both developed or revised in a cohesive manner, but then ultimately how can they be implemented in a way that actually fosters effective synergy and with all the potential efficiencies and savings that might come along with that. That's easier said than done, and hence the need for the Joint Capacity Building Initiative in order to help take that forward. And I should also say that it's not just on behalf of the parties, but also what's the role for the observers and the others that are involved in these processes, even though recognizing that they are party-driven processes. What's the role for civil society? What's the role for Indigenous peoples and local communities, for the private sector, for the financial sector? And for looking at it across a sort of a whole of society and whole of government approach, how do the other ministries that maybe are outside the Ministry of Environment or whoever it might be that has responsibility, say, for implementing the CBD or for CCD or for UNFCCC, how can we be looking across a sort of a pan-government approach as well as a whole of society approach, recognizing that there's also a role for local level action as well as at national level and certainly at the international level. So I'll just wrap up to say my thanks to my colleagues, our colleagues within the other secretariats for this initiative. It's actually quite exciting within the secretariats to see this coming together in a more meaningful manner, that it's not just talk but actually leading to action, and to Rio Impact and their colleagues in terms of taking the joint capacity building initiative forward. And I just finalize to say thank you very much for this event today, and all the best with the discussions over the course of the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tristan. And now I would like to invite Marie-Claire Graff from Youth Negotiators Academy for her opening remarks. Marie-Claire, please.
Well, what if we have negotiators and decision makers who actually understand the interlinkages and the synergies in a way that we don't have to talk about it in a separate room, on a separate topic, in a separate time? What if actually the decisions are done with the synergies already in mind? And I think that's where we actually currently lacking the ability to really have synergetic decisions, because most negotiators here, and if we truly ask ourselves, very often we ourselves as well, do not actually understand the other conventions to the level that we can actually take the decisions and negotiate with the complexity in mind of the conventions. Well, that's the work we are doing at the Youth Negotiators Academy. We are training negotiators from the parties to actually prepare them for this task, to enable them to understand the interconnectedness of the conventions, to train young people to take their seats as rightful citizens, and with this also rightful delegates of their parties, to actually negotiate. I myself was a young negotiator for the government of Switzerland at the age of 23, and I'm actually quite proud to say that after 3 years now, we this year trained over 300 negotiators for the UNFCCC, and we trained 100 negotiators for the UNCCD. 150 negotiators are right now here from over 60 countries who are right now driving the negotiations as part of the member state delegations, and all of them got the training in the interlinkages of the Rio Conventions, have an understanding of the other conventions. But what we are realizing that most people who are actually right now taking decisions do not sometimes even know that in 1 week, there is another convention starting in Riyadh around land. Most people don't even know that we had just major decisions in the CBD. And I think that's where the problem starts. When we talk about capacity building, I think it's really crucial, as Tristan, you just mentioned before, that the ones who are taking the decisions currently actually really understand this, not only on a multilateral level where we're taking the decisions right now here, but as you also saw on the previous slide before, how we actually bring this home. How can we actually then bring this to the entities on the ground? And that's exactly where we believe that we need to have a more diverse pool of decision makers, and we believe we need more intergenerational leadership by bringing young people, not only as decoration, but bring them at the heart of decision making. That's why we provide a quite rigorous 6 months capacity building program for young people who are nominated by the national focal points, invest as well a lot in community building, so the young people actually get to know each other from different countries, but also within the country themselves, from civil society, from junior governmental positions. And also what we do, we fully fund their participation at the COP, as ultimately the young people need to be right here at the tables to take the decisions. And I think that's really what drives us, that how can we make these processes which once were joint and were born out of this joint desire, bring them back together and ensure that the decision makers themselves are understanding the synergies, so they can not only negotiate here, but also bring it back home, and actually the ones who are on the ground implement the real actions. Very often actually already do this in a synergetic way, but actually we have policies which serve the local implementers and people, in contrary to what we very often see, that the policies are actually dividing, the funds are actually dividing the people who actually want to bring these things back home. We believe that only by intergenerational leadership this is possible, and that's why the Youth Negotiators Academy is doing what we're doing, and we are also very welcome and open to collaborate with everyone here in the room. For us, this is a really important topic, as many young people, especially again the ones on the ground, the indigenous people, already live the synergies in their life, and I think we have to do the work to once again, really go back to what it was, that the synergy is at the heart of it, the nature and the people. I will also be here if you have any questions of which countries are part of it. You can talk to me afterwards. With this, handing over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marie-Claire, and thank you for your insightful speech and for highlighting the need to include youth in the different processes. Thank you for that. So we will now move to our presentation session, which will provide snapshot on entry points for building synergies. And please note that the presentation slides that we are going to use today, those will be uploaded on our UNFCCC event page. And with that, I would like to invite Kazi Amdadul Haq from Friendship.
May I request? I would actually echo with Tristan and Mary, that is OI3 COP. Why not one COP like this room? So definitely, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am from Bangladesh. My name is Kazi Amdadul Haq. You can call me Kazi from Friendship. I quickly share you about a magic tree in our country. So we got some magic. It's magic, in the country, in Bangladesh. Yes, let's build synergies as all of our ambition. And first of all, in Bangladesh, we are in climate crisis from the very beginning. And, our ranking is within 7 in the last 20 years. The 60% of the country flooding every year, 1.4 times tropical cycle increase, salinity increase 35%, 21% more than in the last 35 years. Coastal community is really, because of salinity and sea level rise, livelihood, life, everything is all threats. So we are really struggling how best we can help people. And we have one God-gifted asset, is called mangroves forest. And we realize this mangroves forest is the safeguard for the community in coastal community. And whatever intervention, friendship, implementing health, education, economic opportunity, whatever it is, all, very difficult to sustain the benefits and impact of those interventions because people are, always uncertainty with their assets, with their households, with their locations, everything. So storms, cyclones, So we realized, the mangroves can be the magic tree, big help to protect people from the storm, cyclone, and the sea level rise and all those things. And not only that, mangroves is a safeguard, it's a natural barrier in our coastal areas. And not only that, we realize, that also a source of livelihood opportunities. Now let me talk to you, but the threat is, because the goat and all other livestock is their asset, they eat everything. The newly sapling trees, they eat everything. Every year, the tidal surge, cyclone, 2-3 times, damaging the river bank. So we jointly plan with the community, how can we help community and how can we work together. And you see in the corner, the mapping, community and friendship work together to draw the map, how really we can proceed for mangrove close to their home in the river bank areas. Because seeds floats in the river, they can catch, we introduce cash for seed program, they can catch seed, they can prepare saplings, and we can plan for plantation. And we built largest nursery in the country for mangrove nursery. And that nursery helping us because we don't have nursery in the beyond government. So in the private sector, we got the largest mangrove nursery, and people engage in mangrove plantation. We didn't jump for plantation in the very beginning. We consulted. They have their indigenous knowledge. They have trust. They have confidence. And they know what is the benefits of forest and mangroves. And we keep in touch with the local government and forest department. And then when we conduct the mangroves plantation, it's like a festival. Whole community takes part, and they are really helping for the protection, selection of caretaker, and the areas. And we realize mangroves is not only our safeguard as a natural barrier, not only a source for livelihoods, like that they can catch fish and crab, they can collect honey. Annual, we can collect 2,000 ton honey and beeswax, so that, it's huge. And not only that, in Bangladesh, 30% fish is catching from the mangrove associated areas, which is 500,000 people dependent on these opportunities. And not only, and these are all this very, you can say, no cost investment. The mangroves, we had very little investment, but the crisis, if you consider with the crisis, around 19 million people dependent on forest. So their dependency is a bit threat for the forest, for the flora, fauna. And because they don't have opportunity, because crops gone because of the salinity, fish gone. So then mangroves, if we then bring back the crops, the fish, livelihood, catch the crab, honey, little fruits we call for the pickle and other things. And we realize at one point it's not only these things, it's carbon sequestration, all we know. We act locally, the plantation of tree, and benefit goes globally because mangroves sequestered 5 to 10 times more carbon than the tropical forest. And at the same time, we noticed in the riverbank area is captured sedimentation, and we're gaining land. And that we realized, oh my God, this is great. And the plantation we have done around 200 hectares by this time, trust me, for the rest of life, 100,000 people will not face the storm cyclone because of this mangroves protection. And finally, land I mentioned you. So biodiversity loss in Bangladesh, the biodiversity loss cost around 6.5 billion because of underfunding projects, we can't. and that is close to 3.4% GDP of our country. I believe if we can invest mangroves, that will bring back, that will reduce the funding gap. And if we invest for biodiversity $1, that will bring $9 benefit. So we need to rethink whatever available in our hand, whatever practice in our hand, whatever skill we have, we need to replicate, we need to support this. And finally, you see in the very beginning, year 1, the top bottom, top left, year 2, 1.5 year 3 in the bottom, and year 5. So thank you, thank you. And trust me, credit not goes to me, credit goes to the community people, women who never been in city, who don't use washing machine, who do not use the air conditioner, who never been in the car. They are the credible for these things. They are really protecting climate crisis. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Kazi, for this very insightful case study on how mangrove can contribute to synergies. Thank you again. So now we move on to our second presentation, and I would like to invite Ludwig from Rio Impact for this presentation. Ludwig has been an important partner in the joint capacity building program also. And after his presentation, Ludwig will walk you through the group work exercise that's going to take place right after. Ludwig.
Thank you, Stefania, and thank you, Kazi, and our dear colleagues who introduced the session also for these fantastic messages. And thanks for bringing the case of the mangrove ecosystems. Because in one of the first test trainings we had on synergies between Rio Conventions, one of the feedback we got is, hey, what about marine and coastal ecosystems? Because we talked a lot about terrestrial ecosystems, forest being, of course, one of the obvious ones. But mangrove is a perfect ecosystem to build synergies, and there are many others. So we're going to see that. And also a very good case for mentioning the importance of local knowledge, which is actually one of our key topics. How do we leverage local and indigenous knowledge for synergies? Let me see if I can move through it. Yeah. So just this topic of synergies between Rio Conventions and the joint Rio Conventions Capacity Building Program. It's really meant to serve country-level processes. How can we help national focal points to build more synergies? And of course, as you know, those national focal points, they have the mandate to steer and to catalyze the implementation of the Rio Conventions at country level. And so their role for synergies is very obvious in countries where they are under the same roof, but like Namibia, for example, and there are others. But in many cases, they are not under the same roof. They are in different ministries, so they have to find ways to come together, to work together. And so how can we help this process of national focal points coordination also through the program is for us very important. So beyond all the knowledge and the knowledge products, the science of synergies, let's say, there is also the stakeholders engagement process that comes with it. And luckily, we have many topics for the synergies. Those who were at the Cali COP, those who are going to Riyadh for UNCCD COP, as Marie-Claire very well explained, you all know that we have many topics that are conducive for synergies. But sometimes we are not aware of exactly how those synergies work because we don't have the reporting approach, the indicators to actually track those synergies. So you understand that the topic of monitoring and evaluation is actually one of the key topics also of the Joint Capacity Building Program. So that's one of the key topics we are working on. And for all those key topics that I'm mentioning, actually we are working on info briefs now. We are working on knowledge products. We are not doing it alone because we collect also the material that other partners have produced. So you're going to find this material available on the website that Stefania showed you through the QR code. We're going to show you the QR code again so you can access the webpage of the Joint Capacity Building Program, the Rio Conventions Joint Capacity Building Program. So many topics conducive for synergies. All those separate planning processes, we still have those separate planning processes. Maybe it's going to change in the future. Let's see what the negotiations will deliver. But for the time being, we have those separated processes. And so let's work with those processes to build synergies within them. And there are many ways to do it. We're going to see the example with the NAPs. And luckily, we are not alone to do it, because there are many support programs already existing for those different processes. The NDC Partnership, the NAP Global Network, the NBSAP Accelerator Partnership, the Global Mechanism of the UNCCD, and the LDN Target Setting Program. So all those programs, they have resources to help countries move ahead on their different planning processes. And these are great multipliers possibly for synergies. So currently, actually, and this is very timely, this session, because you'll see we're going to have an exercise where we'll question how can we use NAPs as entry point for synergies. We are currently putting a lot of brain into this with my team and the Rio Convention Secretariat's colleagues on how to use the NAP framework. So, of course, we have the NAP guidelines that probably you know already. That is a great document, very systematic, with 4 key elements, 17 steps, on how to actually develop a NAP. So, of course, all these steps and elements, these are for us the entry points that we are looking more in details and trying to identify those elements and steps where we can include the synergies. Some countries have already built in synergies in their NAPs, like Namibia, for example. As I was mentioning, they have the 3 NFPs, the 3 national focal points under the same roof, so that helps. But then also is a question of how do you engage all your key ministries and stakeholders at country level. Key topics that are conducive for synergies in their NAP, some of their priority sectors were, for example, agriculture, with all the ecosystem-based pest and disease management, water resources, with blue forestry and urban greening, for example. So many entry points that you can use for synergies. The NAP process is very well detailed also and worked on by the NAP Global Network. And you see these letters A, B, C, D. In fact, these are the 4 key elements of the NAP technical guidelines produced by UNFCCC. And so what we are doing now is looking at how can we include the synergies into those different elements, and then the sub-steps. Well, I'm not going to go into the details because then we would have needed a 2-hour session, but we are planning already to have a dedicated webinar on that topic. So when we are ready, and 2 days would be really great to get your feedback and see how you react to that topic, we are going to have like knowledge products written, available for you, and webinars, and probably other ways to share the knowledge as well. So what we are working on now is a checklist approach. We want to look at these different key elements of the NAP guidelines and steps, and systematically have a checklist approach where when stakeholders working on the NAP want to think of synergies, then they have key questions and key ideas on how to build synergies in those elements. Just one example. The first element of the NAP technical guideline is how to lay the groundwork on data information, data available knowledge on vulnerabilities. And so, of course, with purely the climate angle, you would ask mostly about climate vulnerability, impact, knowledge on impacts, elements of the enabling environment for conducting those impact evaluation and vulnerability assessment. But now, with our approach, we would also ask, what are the vulnerabilities related to biodiversity, to ecosystems, to land, and how is the enabling environment conducive or not for also beyond climate resilience, also biodiversity conservation and sustainable land management. So very simple example, but just to show you, we have a very systematic approach to produce these NAP guidelines on how to build synergies in NAP processes. And we're going to do the same actually for the NBSAPs, for the LDN targets, so that all those planning processes are covered. before we move to the exercise, I want really to put light on the work we do on financing for synergies, because of course, most of the global funds that you know can be used for synergies. I'm just giving an example. The climate investment funds, they have a program on forest investment. They have a program on nature, people, and climate. You know, let's use those windows to build synergies. Let's not forget also, countries often have national funding mechanisms, conservation trust funds, national climate funds, and so on. How can we use those domestic mechanisms and some of the national entities that are already accredited to the Adaptation Fund, accredited to the Green Climate Fund, to help them build synergies? Just a case study, SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, has been very agile in getting accredited to the Adaptation Fund, to the GCF, and also is a GEF implementing partner. And one of the projects they developed is this project that is a microfinancing facility for local climate action that is meant to channel resources for local farmers to build climate resilience within their practices. So that's funded directly by the Adaptation Fund. And of course, that's a perfect example of how you can build in also climate-smart agriculture practices, ecosystem-based adaptation practices within farming systems. So very good example that is also possibly a catalytic example, because of course, once they have this fund mechanism in place, they can aggregate other sources of funding. So it's very sustainable also from the financing point of view. So with that, I'd like already to introduce our exercise, and of course we'll have time for Q&A, so don't hesitate, but we just want to be sure we have enough time to go through our exercise. Our exercise is how to build an app that is conducive for synergies. And so what we've done, we've taken actually a real case, a real app. I won't tell you the country because I don't want to have diplomatic issues, even though the example is very good, but you know, just UN neutrality, I think we need to adopt also here. What we did is we took several sections, in particular 3 sections on the NAP, that we try to harmonize through building one-page summary for each one of these key topics. So we selected the topic of private sector engagement. How can the NAP be conducive to engage the private sector? The NAP financing strategies, what is planned in the NAP to finance adaptation, and the NAP monitoring and evaluation. So you will receive a guidance document. We're going to share this on the tables, and we'll ask each table to concentrate on one of these topics. Okay, so you can choose. I think we have more than 3 tables, so we can have maybe 2 tables also working on the same topic. It's not an issue. And, or you're free also to join another table if you want. And you're going to have 2 questions per table to address. And those 2 questions are dealing with the topic of synergies. And those 2 questions will help you deep dive into how those key topics can be better in including the issue of synergies. So how can private sector engagement be more conducive to build synergies? How can NAP financing strategies support synergies within the NAP implementation? How can NAP monitoring and evaluation include better the other conventions targets for the CBD, for the UNCCD? Okay, so maybe we start by sharing the guidelines, and then we're going to give you about 15 minutes. Even less would be great, actually. Between 10 and 12 minutes because of the timing we have. So you're also invited maybe to concentrate on only one question if you prefer, if it's easier, okay? So don't hesitate to look only at the first question, or the second one, you can decide in your group. And then we're going to have a few minutes of feedback from the group. All right? So good luck and enjoy. Dear colleagues, we'll have to give you the floor for short feedback to the plenary. We are sorry because, of course, the time was a bit short, but don't hesitate in your reflection to share both some ideas that emerge from the exercise, but also some ideas in terms of the pedagogical tool, itself. Or is it useful, what you would see differently, in case you have some reflections. Is there a group that would like to start? I see some took already ample notes. It looks really good on the flip charts. Or should we go by order? Group 1 here. Would you like to start?
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Right, so the question was what capacity gaps and needs private sector actors might have to align their adaptation strategies with biodiversity conservation and sustainable land practices. And one of the things that we were talking about, which I was talking about, was specifically aligning everyone's interest and making sure that even those actors who were not very interested in conservation would still have a place and would be incentivized either through punishment or reward or incentive structures to actually keep biodiversity and sustainable land management in mind. So, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I think I'll pass it on to you after I say quickly that I think that one of the issues that we have when we think about access to climate finance, so when we think about the Green Climate Fund and other vehicles, is that the standards for projects are really high, and sometimes on the ground, local communities are not prepared. They don't have enough capacity to build a project that reaches the standard that is expected of them for funding to be obtained, and it might be of the interest of the private sector to help these communities in such a way that these projects work and become scalable, and then they become something that walks on its own legs in such a way that the private sector could also maybe profit from. And so maybe it would do both things at the same time, profit and then also help.
Thank you. Maybe a last remarks, and then we're going to move to the next group.
Yes.
And don't hesitate to speak loud enough so that
Yes.
the other groups
Okay.
can hear.
What I see as a potential gap is that when governments are in a hurry to build up infrastructure for example, climate change adaptation, that they lower the bureaucratical barriers, and then they might lose some of the biodiversity aspects of the research being done and NGO participation and public. Yeah.
Thank you. So 3 great ideas here. We'll collect the flip charts in any case. I don't know if you are able to note those ideas also on the flip chart as maybe just key points. We're going to move to the second group. So on NAP financing strategies, please, for your reflections.
Okay. Or should I? Well, the group, shared different ideas. First of all, the question number 1, compared to domestic source, what are the advantage, disadvantage? We realize, if more money definitely is an advantage, but it should be a low interest, or we wanted to say 0 interest, and funding related to economic opportunity and resilience. And it's a disadvantage is a bigger burden, and reporting long term for country, and complicated procedure, conditions and eligibility.
So it's interesting because it overlaps with some of the conclusions over there. Because of course, you can think of NAP financing strategies for involving the private sector, so this is not in silo.
Right. And the second point you want to know, focus on prioritizing projects to maximize co-benefits, biodiversity.
Excellent, excellent. Especially biodiversity finance is becoming more and more important. And you have got also LDN finance with the LDN fund and other sources.
Get the return.
So how can we combine this? You know, because sometimes you look at climate finance separated from the biodiversity finance streams, but in reality, in the real world, all these can work in synergy. Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now the third group, working on M&E, not the easiest topic.
Yes, hi, thank you. So for our group, indeed, we didn't have an easy question, but I can proudly say that we came up with a few ideas. So the first one would be that the indicators used for GGA, so for the global goal and adaptation, they can coordinate with the other existing indicators in the other conventions, like, for example, the CBD. Then secondly, we decided that it was very important to include indigenous peoples and local communities' perspectives, as well as private sector perspectives and the whole of society perspectives within it, not just specifically some people who think those indicators are relevant. On the third item, we had that it was important to monitor the tipping points, so which forests or which areas are at most risk and are at the edge of collapsing. So monitoring those areas are very, very relevant. Then we also talked about coherence between the three topics, but specifically avoiding that the solution of one becomes the problem of the other, right? So we do this preventive maladaptation. And then, on the other hand, we focused on the human rights-based approaches, so to always bear that in mind as an overarching framework, and specifically to have safeguards on that, to prevent that from escaping even the monitoring and evaluation. And then, finally, we also outstood that coherence is very important at the local and subnational level, which is usually where all of the initiatives and all of the data is taken from. So if already from the basis we start coordinating and we start making all of the indicators coherent between them, then it's easier to escalate them and have a positive impact.
Well, thank you so much. I think these are great examples. The last point make me think also of the landscape approach. That is a good framework to build synergies, and having landscape-based indicators also can help you build those synergies. The topic of avoiding counterproductive effects of working on synergies is also addressing the trade-offs. And having indicators on these trade-off issues could be also very relevant, and in connection with the tipping points, I suppose, being aware that you should not go beyond a certain threshold for one given solution, because maybe then that generates counterproductive effect, negative effect for another convention's objective. So you see, this type of exercise help us reflect on how to build synergies effectively. And it's really not impossible. It's mostly a question of putting the right experts and stakeholders around the table and thinking more systematically how to build the synergies in those different steps. So you're going to find more of guidelines and knowledge products to do that as part of the joint Rio Conventions capacity building program. So we really invite you to follow us, and there's going to be more and more offers also at country level to work on those topics. So now we are getting close to the end, and I'd like to thank you very much for all the great work you've done during this exercise, even though it was short but really informative. And to close that session, I'd like to give the floor to Alejandro Kilpatrick, who is the manager for capacity building at UNFCCC. Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Let me. Thank you very much, Ludwig, and thank you everyone for staying until this a bit late hour and being very engaged. This is just a bit of a taste of what this joint capacity building program for the Rio Conventions is. And we are very happy to see that the issue of synergies continues to be important, but more importantly is how to materialize them. Stop talking about synergies are important, we all know they're important, but how do we materialize them? How do we take them to the next level? We see when you do a project on the ground, it's almost, synergies are almost automatic. So sometimes we believe that we create these constructs of silos within these processes, and through this joint capacity building program, we want to break those silos and bring everyone to the same level playing field on synergies, and then how to materialize them and recognize that what countries are doing on the ground is contributing to the objectives of in this case, the 3 Rio Conventions. And as we've seen that it even brings economic benefits, cost savings when you do things in a synergistic manner. So we'll keep working on this program and continue delivering products, as mentioned by Ludwig, so new info briefs, new webinars, and hopefully next year scale up the program to take it to the next level, national level. So please keep looking at our webpage. And thank you very much. And in the spirit of time, I think we need to close this event. But thank you very much for your participation. And thank you to our wonderful speakers, from friendship to showing us in real life what synergies look like through the sustainable use of mangroves. So that shows that it can be done, and the solutions are not extremely complicated. It just needs some goodwill and collaboration. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening.